In my last video, I discussed all the issues with Skull Island Reign of Kong, while also highlighting some aspects I thought were great about the attraction. In today's video, however, I can't say that'll be the same case, as we're going to be discussing Race Through New York, starring Jimmy Fallon. With that being said, I want to explore not necessarily what makes this attraction disappointing, but what makes this attraction just so boring. Just like in the last video, I want to state that the opinions shared here are my own and not definitive viewpoints. If you enjoy any of the attractions I discuss in these videos, that's perfectly fine, and I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments down below. As before, the format for this video will include a story and attraction overview, as well as an examination of its theming and queue, and how all of that ties together to create the full ride experience. To understand how Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon came to be, we first need to look at how Universal was acquired by Comcast, as it spearheaded the attraction's creation and set a new precedent for introducing attractions at Universal parks. In January of 2011, Comcast would acquire a 51% stake in Universal, and by March of 2013, they would fully acquire the company. So you may be wondering, what does that have to do with the Jimmy Fallon attraction? Well, back in 2018 when I worked at Universal Studios Florida, it was explained during our training that Universal was once at risk of closing its doors. But Comcast's acquisition saved the company, particularly the parks, and as part of their strategy, Comcast would expect Universal to release a new attraction every year or so, even if it meant closing their existing classics. Additionally, Comcast wanted NBC to have a presence in the parks, leading to the creation of Race Through New York, based on the popular race segment from The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. As mentioned, Race Through New York is based on the popular race segment from The Tonight Show. However, instead of a celebrity competing this time, guests are the stars of the race. The experience begins with Jimmy Fallon introducing the attraction and describing the sights guests will encounter on their race through New York. After that, the race begins and guests race Jimmy Fallon through the studio building and various New York landmarks, including Times Square, the Statue of Liberty, and even a subway. The race features various cameos as well, familiar to fans of the show, most notably Sarah the Teenager and #the Panda. Besides these elements, the attraction also includes a segment on the moon where guests travel on a space train that launches them back down to Earth before the race ends. The attraction is housed within a replica of the 30 Rockefeller Plaza building, and similar to my approach in the Skull Island Reign of Kong video, I'll go over the positives and negatives of the Race Through New York, and then explain why, in my opinion, this attraction is lackluster. Before diving into the positives, I want to be upfront, there aren't many, at least for me personally. I know a lot of people consider Fast and Furious Supercharged to be the worst attraction in the park, but I would argue that Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon is equally disappointing. That said, if I had to highlight some positives, I'd start with its queue, as I really enjoy the historical aspects of it, and with NBC showcasing its old technology and paying homage to past talk show hosts by giving each their own display case filled with various memorabilia. This, along with the interactive games available later in the queue, adds a nice touch that fits the attraction's personality. I also like that guests are provided color-coded cards that correspond to colors in the NBC logo. It's a small but thoughtful detail. Looking at the attraction experience, a positive there is the pizza scent that's pumped out during the ride, which adds a bit of sensory appeal, which really helps with guest immersion. Finally, I'll say this. If you're a huge Jimmy Fallon fan, this attraction is definitely for you, as it's packed full of fan service. With that said though, there isn't much more to cover, so let's move into the negatives. Starting with the negatives, let's begin with the attraction building itself, which is arguably one of the most unappealing in the park, as it looks incredibly corporate, almost as if it's meant for staff rather than an attraction. In fact, if it weren't for the windows showing its gift shop and the Jimmy Fallon sign, it wouldn't be so obvious that this is a ride at all. Moving into the queue, there's a significant negative that I want to discuss, that being the digital queue feature. Not to be confused with quick queue, and I'll explain later. Universal introduced this feature with the idea of reducing its wait times and spreading them out. In fact, it's the primary way to access attractions at Volcano Bay, and is better implemented there, as well as a bit different. However, at this park, the feature falls short. The concept is that guests would select a time within the Universal app to return to the attraction for later, theoretically helping reduce wait times and spreading the load. The problem here is that this feature is only available on 2 attractions in the park, Race Through New York and Fast and Furious, which are arguably the worst attractions in the park. Now, while I understand that the queues for these rides were designed with digital queue in mind, it ultimately feels flawed and abandoned, as Universal has not included it in any newer attraction since, and does not use it at all in Islands of Adventure. But moving into the ride experience itself, I mentioned earlier that this is on par with Fast and Furious in terms of disappointment, and here's why. First, let's consider the story. If you're a Jimmy Fallon fan, you're definitely going to enjoy this attraction through and through. However, without prior knowledge of the source material, guests may feel confused or flat out bored. See, attractions should be designed to make it easy for guests to feel a part of the experience with minimal background knowledge required. A great example of this is Transformers the Ride. Guests only need to recognize a few main characters like Optimus or Bumblebee to enjoy the experience, while die-hard fans will catch additional rewarding details. This isn't the case with Race Through New York though, which relies heavily on references to a talk show, not a long-standing IP or an immersive fantasy world. The humor is often forced, and the story lacks depth, making it hard to connect with and enjoy. Finally, the ride experience feels extremely lackluster. It's essentially a stationary theater with a screen and minimal movement, and I do mean minimal. The motion is so slight that even the Simpsons ride offers a more immersive simulator experience, and that building was created in the 90s. On top of that, the visuals don't offer anything unique or groundbreaking compared to other attractions in the park. So overall, this ride falls flat, feeling more like a bland viewing experience than a full-fledged attraction. Looking at Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon, it's clear the attraction feels out of place and overall lacks appeal. It comes across as a straightforward attempt by Universal to push NBC branding within the park. This is made even worse by the fact that it replaced what had become a Universal classic, Twister Ride It Out. Although Twister wasn't the most technically impressive, it offered a refreshing change of pace compared to other attractions at the park. When Race Through New York opened, Universal Studios Florida was going through a phase of adding screen-based attractions, making many experiences in the park feel repetitive. This trend in turn made the park less unique and less of a draw compared to its sister park, Islands of Adventure. Thankfully, Universal seems to have learned its lesson in recent years, shifting away from this model with newer attractions. Ultimately, Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon feels forced and is a boring experience, and hopefully, Universal will consider replacing it soon with something that resonates more with parkgoers, helping restore Universal Studios Florida to a state of more compelling and worthwhile visitation. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this series, comment down below with an attraction you'd like to see featured, as it could be in the next video. And if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe, as it lets me know how much you enjoy this type of content. With that being said, until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video.